Welcome to session 4 of Joseph, God's Faithfulness in the Waiting. In this session, we see Joseph encounter the cupbearer and the baker. So in your reading this week, you're going to read through Genesis chapter 40, and I want to highlight a few things there for you. Depending on the version Bible that you're reading, you may see something that says after this or sometime later, sometime after this. We're going to notice that something's going on here with the time period. It's taking a while, but we're not told how long yet. In our coming sessions, we're going to get more of an indicator about how long Joseph is in prison. So right now he's in prison. He's interacting with these two officials from Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the baker. And let's see what happens here. I'm going to read a few scriptures from our chapter. So this is Genesis chapter 40, verses 6 through 8. And it says, when Joseph came to them, that's the cupbearer and the baker, the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Okay, so there's a few things I noticed about this little piece of interaction, and some of it is what we don't see in Scripture. First of all, we do see Joseph's tenderness, his kindness towards them. He wants to know what's upsetting them. We don't see Joseph telling them his dreams and how that hasn't happened for him yet. We see him pointing to God, that God is the one that can interpret dreams. Throughout the chapter, we see that Joseph does listen to their dreams and he's able to interpret them. And it comes out just as Joseph says, just as God has orchestrated. In this entire chapter, we see that God is orchestrating things behind the scenes, and it's happening in God's timing, not in Joseph's timing. The end of the chapter that you're going to read ends kind of on a sad note. Joseph has interpreted the dreams. The cupbearer sees what happens. The cupbearer is supposed to remember Joseph to Pharaoh. And the last verse of this chapter says in verse 23, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. God didn't forget Joseph, though. Joseph is probably in a really low point at this point in his life. He's sitting in prison. He doesn't know how long. We'll see in the coming chapters how long he really is there. But right now, he's probably feeling really forgotten and wondering, why would God give Joseph dreams of something that's supposed to happen, and him sitting there with these unfulfilled dreams, and yet he's having to interpret dreams for somebody else and seeing how that ends up happening right away. And Joseph is waiting. He's waiting here to see what happens with God. But in his waiting, he's faithfully serving in the prison. He's a prisoner, but he's also serving in the prison. And he's waiting and he's listening and he's caring about other people. That's an amazing thing to see about his character right now. So in your homework this week, you're going to be exploring Genesis chapter 40. And I want you to think about your own life. Is your life turning out the way that you thought? Did some unexpected things happen? Are you able to trust God even in the waiting? In your homework, I'll also share a little bit about my story and what's happened in my family. And right now, as I'm videoing this, I don't have any updates of things changing. We're still waiting to see what will happen with my husband's health. Sometimes I'll be asked and people will hope like, oh, I hoped he was doing better. And I'll say, his health hasn't changed. He's able to manage his condition. But the story doesn't end there. I can tell you that God is at work in my husband's life, that even though he's walking this road with this condition, I can see evidence of how God is using him in a unique way that he could only do through this process. I can see God at work. So for you, even if you're not in the situation or the position that you had hoped, do you see God at work? Do you see his fingerprints? Sometimes we can now, and sometimes it's not really revealed to us in a long time. But I encourage you to hang in there in the waiting. Keep listening to his voice. Keep trusting that God is faithful. And keep following along in Joseph's story. It's exciting to see what happens next.